It was a chilly Monday morning in downtown Atlanta, and the city was already humming with life. People in business suits rushed across the sidewalks, coffee cups in hand, earbuds in, minds focused on meetings and money. Inside the large glass doors of Central Valley Bank, the mood was no different. Busy, sharp, polished. The staff were already at their desks, typing away, the sound of clicking keyboards mixing with a low murmur of conversations and the occasional ring of a phone. Then he walked in. He wasn't dressed like anyone else in the bank. No suit. No shiny shoes. His clothes were old. Faded jeans, a worn-out coat with missing buttons, and shoes that looked like they had walked miles. His dark skin was wrinkled from age, and his gray beard reached down to his chest. His back was slightly bent, but his eyes were sharp, focused. People turned to look as he entered, not because of who he was, but because of how out of place he seemed. The receptionist, a young woman named Hannah, looked up from her desk, confused. "Can I help you, sir?" she asked politely, though her voice carried a touch of hesitation. The old man smiled gently. "Yes, ma'am," he said slowly. "I'm here to speak with the branch manager. I have some business to attend to." Hannah glanced over at her coworker with raised eyebrows, then back at him. "Do you have an appointment?" "No, miss," he said. "But I believe he'll want to see me. You see, this bank. It belongs to me." There was a pause. Then a short, awkward chuckle escaped from the cubicle nearby. Another employee looked up, smirking. Hannah tried to keep her expression calm, but it was clear she didn't take him seriously. "I'm sorry, sir," you said. "You own the bank?" The old man nodded. "Yes, I do. Or at least I did. Maybe still do. I'd like to speak to someone in charge, please." Now people were watching openly. A security guard near the corner stepped a little closer, not aggressively, but alert. One of the bankers, a man in his 30s named Jason, came over and leaned in to whisper to Hannah, "You want me to handle this?" She nodded quickly and stepped aside. Jason walked over to the old man, hands in his pockets, trying to keep his tone light. "Sir, I think there's been a misunderstanding. This is Central Valley Bank. Are you sure you're in the right place?" The old man nodded again. "Oh, I know exactly where I am. I've known this place longer than most of you have been alive." Jason smiled tightly. "Right. Look, if you need assistance with your account, I'd be happy to help. But claiming you own the bank, that's a bit of a stretch, don't you think?" At that point, a couple of staff members laughed quietly. Not loud enough to be cruel, but just enough to show they didn't believe a word he was saying. The old man didn't react. He just stood there calmly, eyes drifting around the room like he was seeing something no one else could. "This building. I helped design the lobby. That marble wall behind the counters, that was my idea. I planted the cherry blossom trees outside. They were just saplings back then." Jason's smile faded slightly. "Okay, sir. I think it's time we helped you outside, maybe find someone to contact for you." The security guard stepped forward now. "Sir, I'm going to have to ask you to leave if you don't have business here." The old man looked at him, then at the others. "You don't remember, do you?" he said softly. "None of you know who I am. Not even a clue." There was silence for a beat. Then the security guard gently took his arm. "Let's go, sir." The old man didn't resist. He gave a small sigh and turned toward the door. But just before he stepped out, he looked over his shoulder and said, "Tell Mr. Langston that Elijah Carter stopped by. He'll know." Jason blinked. "Wait, who?" "Elijah Carter," the old man repeated. "Ask him what happened in 1972. Then he walked out, the door closing behind him with a soft click. Inside the bank, people slowly returned to their routines. Jason frowned and pulled out his phone, curiosity getting the better of him. He opened the company's internal system and typed in the name. Elijah Carter. No results. He called the manager, Mr. Langston, who was out at a business meeting. "Hey," Jason said casually. "Some old man came in saying he owns the bank. Claimed his name was Elijah Carter. know anything about that. There was a pause on the other end of the line. Long one. Say that name again, Mr. Langston asked. Elijah Carter. Another pause. This one felt heavier. Did you say what he looked like? Yeah. Older black gentleman, long gray beard, worn clothes. Didn't seem dangerous. Just off. There was silence again. Then Mr. Langston's voice came back, lower this time. Jason, listen to me carefully. If that man comes back, don't let him leave. Call me immediately. Jason blinked. What? Why? Who is he? I'll explain later. Just don't let him walk away again. But it was too late. Elijah was already gone. His figure slowly disappearing down the sidewalk, as unnoticed by the world as he had been when he walked in. And yet, somewhere in that building, the name Elijah Carter was beginning to stir memories long buried. Memories some people thought were lost. Memories others had worked very hard to keep quiet. What happened in 1972? And why did the mention of one man's name suddenly shake the calm walls of a modern-day bank? The answers were out there. But no one was ready for what was coming next. Jason couldn't shake the conversation with Mr. Langston. The urgency in his boss's voice was undeniable. But what really bothered him was the way Langston had reacted when he'd mentioned the name Elijah Carter. It was more than just surprise. It was something deeper, something he couldn't quite put his finger on. For a moment, Jason considered driving to Langston's office to ask more questions, but the nagging feeling that something was off kept him glued to his desk. It was just a name. But why did it matter so much? Jason decided to dig into it himself. He called up the bank's internal records again, searching for any trace of Carter. There was nothing. Not a hint of a past employee, not a reference to a shareholder, not even an old business partner. But Langston had said Carter would know. So Jason did what most people do when they hit a brick wall. He went to the one place that still held all the old secrets. The archives. The archives were tucked away on the top floor, a place few people bothered to visit. Dusty old records, contract files, and accounts from decades past lined the walls of that cramped room. The air smelled like paper and ink, and the hum of the city outside barely made it through the thick glass windows. Jason didn't care for the place. It felt like the kind of room where history was buried, forgotten by everyone who didn't want to deal with the truth. But if Elijah Carter had once had anything to do with the bank, the archives were the place to start. As he sifted through the piles of documents, old photos and ledgers, something odd caught his eye. A small, worn envelope tucked into the back of a dusty file. The envelope wasn't labeled, but it had the look of something private, something no one else had ever bothered to open. Without thinking, Jason pulled it out and carefully slid it open. Inside was a single photograph, a black and white shot of a man standing in front of a bank. It was grainy, but the face was clear. Jason's heart skipped a beat when he saw the man's features. It was Elijah Carter. But this photo wasn't from some distant past. It looked like it was taken in the early 70s. Elijah was younger, his beard shorter, his eyes still sharp. He wasn't alone in the picture. A group of people surrounded him, all smiling, shaking hands, standing proudly in front of a building. Bank. Jason didn't know how long he stared at the picture, but it felt like hours. Why had no one ever mentioned this man? Why was there no record of him anywhere in the modern bank files? And why had Langston been so insistent that he couldn't let Elijah Carter leave again? Before he could process any more, his phone buzzed with a text from Hannah. Jason, you might want to take a look at the news. Something strange is going on. Jason frowned and quickly opened his news app. The headline hit him like a punch. Bank employee missing after strange encounter with elderly man claiming to be bank owner. The article didn't give many details, just that a woman, another employee from Central Valley Bank, had disappeared after an unusual confrontation with an old man. The missing person's name was Grace, a relatively new hire. She had been working the night shift when she was reportedly seen leaving with the same elderly man, the one who had claimed to own the bank. That wasn't all. Grace's personal belongings were found in the bank's parking garage, and there was a receipt for a flight ticket to an airport halfway across the country. The ticket was booked under a name that Jason had never heard before: Elijah Carter. Jason's stomach dropped. There was no way this was a coincidence. But how could an old man with no apparent ties to the bank have such an effect on people? And why was Grace involved? He looked at the time. It was nearly 4 p.m., and the place was starting to get quieter. He grabbed his coat and made his way out the door, deciding that he needed to find Langston. There were too many unanswered questions, and the missing person situation made it all the more urgent. As Jason entered Langston's office, the manager was hunched over a desk, scribbling something down on a piece of paper. When he saw Jason, he straightened up quickly, his face tense. "I assume you saw the news." Jason nodded. "What's going on, Langston? Who is Elijah Carter, and why does he keep showing up in these files? And where's Grace?" Langston's face paled. He glanced around the office nervously, as if checking to make sure no one could overhear. "You need to be careful, Jason," he said in a low voice. "There are things about this bank that you don't understand, things that go way back. Elijah Carter. He's not just some random person. He's the reason this bank even exists in the first place." Jason furrowed his brow. "What do you mean?" "He owns it, doesn't he?" Langston shook his head slowly. "Not anymore. But he did. And he wasn't just an owner. He was involved in a lot of decisions that no one talks about anymore. Trust me, you don't want to dig too deep." Jason stepped forward. "What happened in 1972? Why does that year matter so much? And why was Grace mixed up in this?" "She's gone, Langston. Do you know what happened to her?" Langston looked away, his jaw tight. "I can't tell you everything. But I'll tell you this. Elijah Carter isn't just a former owner of this bank. He's part of something much bigger, something that's been buried for a long time. And if he's looking for something now, we all might be in danger." Jason felt his pulse quicken. "What are you talking about? What danger?" Langston looked him dead in the eye. "I can't explain everything, but whatever you do, stay away from Elijah. Stay away from the past. People who get too close, they don't come back." Jason didn't know what to say. He was starting to feel like he was in way over his head, but the missing employee and the connections to Elijah Carter couldn't be ignored. He turned to leave, but Langston stopped him with a final warning. "Jason, I'm telling you this because you're part of this now. Don't make the same mistake I made. There's a reason people avoid talking about 1972. If Elijah Carter wants something back, it's not just money. It's something far worse." Jason walked out of Langston's office, his mind racing. There was so much more to this than he could have ever imagined. Elijah Carter wasn't just a man with a claim to a bank. He was connected to something far darker, something dangerous. And if Langston's warning was true, Grace might not be the last person to disappear. Jason left Langston's office with more questions than answers. He couldn't shake the feeling that something was wrong, something deep and far-reaching, beyond just the strange disappearance of Grace. Langston's warning echoed in his head. People who got too close to Elijah Carter didn't come back. What had happened in 1972? Why was this one man's name causing so much fear? The sun had started to dip below the horizon as Jason walked to his car, his mind still spinning with fragments of conversations and the unsettling photograph of Elijah Carter. He needed more information, but where could he get it? The archives were a dead end, at least for now. He thought about going back to the apartment he rented, but it felt like too much of a safe place, a place where he could hide from the uncomfortable truth. He didn't want to think that way, but the warning made him feel like he was on the edge of something he couldn't control. He drove aimlessly for a while, his hands gripping the steering wheel as the headlights cut through the gathering dark. It wasn't until he reached the outskirts of town that he saw it, the old diner he used to visit with his father. It had been years since he'd been here, but the neon lights flashing in the window seemed to call him in. Maybe a conversation with someone who had been around longer would shed some light on the strange turn his life had taken. Inside, the diner smelled like fried food and strong coffee, the kind of place that felt stuck in time. The waitress, a woman in her late 50s named Maggie, looked up when Jason walked in. She gave him a nod, her expression neutral. "I'll take a coffee," Jason said, sliding into one of the booths. "Coming right up," Maggie replied. She set a cup down in front of him before disappearing behind the counter. Jason sat back, looking around the diner. It hadn't changed much in all these years. The same old jukebox, the same peeling booths. It felt oddly comforting, but it also felt like a reminder of a simpler time, one that was starting to slip away from him. He was beginning to realize that he wasn't just chasing down answers about the bank or Elijah Carter anymore. He was chasing something bigger, a piece of his own past. "Been a while," Maggie said as she returned with a fresh pot of coffee. "What's got you out here tonight? You look like you've seen a ghost." Jason hesitated. It wasn't the right moment, not with someone like Maggie, but he had to start somewhere. "You ever hear of a man named Elijah Carter?" Maggie paused, her hand still hovering over the coffee pot. She didn't seem surprised by the question, but there was something in her eyes, something dark. "I've heard of him, sure. Everyone around here has. Why do you ask?" Jason leaned forward, his voice lowered. "I don't know. I think he's connected to something. Something strange. There's a lot about him that doesn't add up." Maggie set the coffee pot down, wiping her hands on a rag. She didn't meet his eyes as she spoke. "Elijah Carter was a big deal around here once. Back in the 70s, he owned more than just that bank. He had his hands in all sorts of things. But there's a reason people stopped talking about him. Trust me, Jason, it's best to leave that alone." Jason frowned. "What do you mean? What happened?" Maggie sighed, glancing over her shoulder as if making sure no one else was listening. "People who got too close to Carter. They disappeared. Not just physically. They were erased. Their names, their work, all of it was wiped clean. If you went digging too deep, you might end up the same way." Jason's heart skipped. "Erased? How?" Maggie's gaze dropped to the coffee cup in her hands. "I can't tell you everything. But there's a lot of stuff buried in this town, Jason. Things that never made it to the news, things that never got recorded. I heard stories about Carter from my grandmother. She was a waitress here back in the 70s, too. She said Carter was like a ghost. He made deals in the shadows. People said he could make things disappear. And if you pissed him off, well, you'd never be seen again." Jason's mind raced. "So what, you think he's still around? That he's connected to Grace's disappearance?" Maggie looked at him, a mixture of caution and regret in her eyes. "I don't know what to tell you, Jason. But I do know one thing: if you keep digging, you might not like where it takes you. Some doors are meant to stay closed." Jason didn't say anything at first. His hands were trembling slightly, his coffee long forgotten. He couldn't stop thinking about Grace, about the photograph, about what Langston had said. Maggie's voice softened, almost like she was speaking to herself. "People around here used to say Carter made a deal with the devil. Maybe he did. No, I don't know. It's like he's trying to come back, trying to take what was his." Jason pushed his coffee cup away, his mind set. He couldn't just let this go. He had to find out who Elijah Carter really was, and what he wanted. The feeling in his gut told him it wasn't just a matter of money. There was something far darker at play here. "Thanks for the coffee, Maggie," he said, standing up. "I need to go." She didn't stop him. She just watched him walk out, her eyes heavy with the weight of unspoken truths. Jason drove back to the city, but his thoughts were far from the streets and the familiar buildings. He was piecing things together in his mind, connecting dots that didn't make sense at first. He remembered the name Langston had mentioned earlier. 1972. What had happened that year? What had Elijah Carter done? Back at the office, Jason decided to take a different approach. He pulled up the historical records again, but this time he looked for something else. He searched for connections to other towns, other businesses, other people. He found nothing of significance until he stumbled upon an old name: Carter Holdings. The name sounded familiar, but he couldn't place it. It was a company, apparently a shell corporation, one that had dealings with Central Valley Bank back in the 1970s. The transactions were odd, highly irregular, and the names attached to them were even stranger. People who never existed. Businesses that were nothing more than names on paper. Jason's pulse quickened as he kept digging. The more he uncovered, the more it became clear. Elijah Carter wasn't just a former bank owner. He was the puppet master of something much larger. Something that stretched across years, across cities, across people. And now, he was coming back to collect what he had lost. But what was it that he had lost? And what would happen if Jason couldn't stop him? The answers were close. Too close for comfort. And the more Jason searched, the more he realized he might not be able to stop this. Not without paying a price he wasn't ready to pay. The hours passed in a blur as Jason scoured every piece of data he could find. His fingers felt stiff from scrolling through endless records. His eyes bloodshot from the strain. The more he uncovered about Carter Holdings, the deeper the rabbit hole seemed to go. It wasn't just the bank anymore. There were links to land deals, to investments in industries that no one had even heard of. But every path he followed only led to more dead ends. Elijah Carter's name was like a shadow, always just out of reach. And yet, everything Jason found seemed to confirm the old man's claims. He was connected to this place in ways no one could fully understand. But what did Carter want now? What was he truly after? Jason's phone buzzed again. It was a text from Langston. "Don't do anything stupid, Jason. Just leave it alone." It wasn't the first warning he'd received, but it was the one that finally got to him. Something was happening. Something was happening, and the pieces were falling into place whether he liked it or not. Grace was gone. Langston was frightened. Maggie's cryptic warnings echoed in his ears. He couldn't ignore it anymore. He had to confront Elijah Carter, find out what he was after, and why Langston and everyone else seemed so terrified of him. But Jason knew that doing so might cost him more than he was willing to pay. He stepped out of the office and into the cold night, his breath visible in the air. The streets felt quieter than they should have been for a city like Atlanta. The normal hum of activity seemed absent, replaced by an unsettling stillness. Felt like the calm before a storm. Jason drove aimlessly for a while, his mind racing, but his destination was clear. He had one more place to check, one last lead. The address he had stumbled upon earlier in the records was a small, unassuming house on the edge of town, a property that hadn't been sold in over 30 years. And according to the paperwork, it had once been connected to Carter Holdings. The house stood at the end of a narrow street, its windows dark, the yard overgrown with weeds. It looked abandoned, like no one had lived there for years, but Jason's instincts told him this was where it all started. The front door creaked as he pushed it open, his heart pounding in his chest. The air inside was thick with dust, the kind of stale, musty smell that comes from a place forgotten by time. He stepped carefully through the hallway, the floorboards groaning under his weight. Everything was still, except for the occasional rustle of leaves outside the broken window. As he walked deeper into the house, Jason noticed something odd. On the far wall in the living room was a large portrait. A black and white photograph of a man, tall and imposing, standing proudly next to an elegant woman. Jason froze. It was Elijah Carter. But this time he wasn't alone. The woman beside him looked oddly familiar, though Jason couldn't place her at first. His mind raced, trying to make the connection. Then it hit him: Grace. The missing employee. It couldn't be a coincidence. He pulled out his phone and snapped a quick picture of the photograph, his mind reeling. The pieces were coming together too quickly. But why had Grace been connected to Carter? What role had she played in this twisted puzzle? Was she part of whatever it was he was chasing? Was she trying to stop him, or was she working with him? A sound from upstairs made him jump. His breath caught in his throat. It was faint, barely audible, but it was there. A soft, rhythmic thumping, almost like footsteps. He wasn't alone. He wasn't alone in the house. His pulse quickened, and he silently cursed himself for not bringing backup. But it was too late for that now. He couldn't turn back. Jason crept up the staircase, the wood beneath his feet groaning louder with every step. The thumping noise grew more distinct as he neared the top. It was coming from the first door on the right. He reached for the doorknob, his hand shaking. Was it Elijah Carter? Was it Grace? Or was it someone else entirely? The door creaked open, and Jason's breath caught in his throat. The room was dimly lit by the flickering light of a single bare bulb. There, standing in the corner, was a figure. A tall man, dressed in the same old worn clothes Jason had seen the day Elijah had walked into the bank. But the man wasn't alone. Standing next to him, chained to the wall, was Grace. Her eyes were wide with fear, but she didn't speak. She only stared at Jason, her face pale, her lips trembling as if she was trying to say something, but the words wouldn't come. "Elijah," Jason whispered, though he wasn't sure if the old man in front of him was really the person he'd been chasing all this time. The figure slowly turned, and Jason's heart nearly stopped. It wasn't Elijah Carter. It was someone else. Someone Jason hadn't expected to see at all. Grace's voice finally broke the silence, a whisper barely above the sound of the wind outside. "He's not who you think he is," she gasped, her eyes darting nervously toward the figure. "He's not Elijah." Jason's confusion deepened, but before he could ask another question, the man spoke. His voice low and cold, carrying a chilling undertone of something ancient, something unrecognizable. "You're in the wrong place, Jason," he said, his gaze locking onto him with an intensity that made the hairs on the back of Jason's neck stand on end. "You've been looking in the wrong places, and now you've found what you shouldn't have." The man's words hung in the air, thick with menace. The room seemed to close in on Jason as the shadows deepened. He felt a wave of panic rise in his chest, but he forced himself to stay calm. Whatever was happening here, it wasn't over. And now it was personal. "Who are you?" Jason demanded, his voice trembling with a mix of fear and defiance. The figure smirked, stepping forward, and the darkness in the room seemed to grow even deeper. "I'm the one who controls what you'll never understand," the man said, his grin widening. "And now that you've seen it, there's no going back." Jason's heart raced as the door slammed shut behind him. The figure took a step closer, and Jason realized with a sudden, sickening certainty, this was only the beginning. The question wasn't how this would end, but if it ever would. The room felt impossibly small as Jason's mind raced, every second stretching into eternity. The man, this stranger, continued to step closer, his grin widening as if savoring Jason's confusion. The air was thick with tension, like the very walls were closing in around him. Jason could barely hear his own breathing over the pounding in his chest, the sudden realization of how deeply he'd fallen into something far more dangerous than he'd imagined. "You don't understand yet, do you?" the man said, his voice smooth, almost mocking. "Elijah Carter was never the true owner of this town, Jason. He was just a front, a decoy. You're looking for the wrong man." Jason felt a wave of dizziness hit him, his head spinning. Every piece of the puzzle he thought he'd been putting together was now crumbling in his mind. "What do you mean?" he managed to whisper, his voice hoarse. The man stepped even closer, his eyes locking onto Jason's with an eerie intensity. "It's always been about power, Jason, not money. Carter didn't control the bank or the businesses. He controlled the people. And I." The man paused, a dark smile creeping across his face. "I am the one who makes them all bend. Carter just did the dirty work." Jason's breath hitched. He wanted to back away, to flee, but his legs felt like they were made of stone. He tried to focus on Grace, but she was still chained to the wall, her eyes wide with fear. She hadn't moved, hadn't said a word since the man had spoken. There was something else, something deeper in her gaze that made Jason's stomach churn. The man's voice broke through his thoughts again. You've been searching for answers, but what you really should be asking is why. Why are you here? Why did you have to find out? There's a reason you're still breathing, Jason. And there's a reason I let you get this far. Suddenly, the walls around Jason seemed to shift. It was as if the room had started to breathe, to pulse with life of its own. The air was thick, almost suffocating, and Jason felt a cold chill sweep through him. It was as if the house itself had become a living thing, watching him, waiting. You think you're the first one to dig into this? The man continued, his voice taking on a more sinister tone. Grace wasn't the first. And neither were you. You're just the latest in a long line of curious souls who thought they could uncover the truth. But you won't be able to stop it, not once it's begun. Jason's mind raced, the pieces finally starting to click together. This wasn't about a man who had disappeared. This wasn't even about Elijah Carter anymore. It was something bigger, something older, something that had been buried beneath layers of lies and forgotten history. The man laughed softly, sensing Jason's realization. You want to know the truth. You want to understand what's really going on. He stepped closer, his face now just inches from Jason's. You're standing on it. You've been standing on it all along. This town. This place. It was never meant to be. It's all built on something dark, something ancient. And I am the keeper of that darkness. I am the one who holds the key. Jason's breath caught in his throat as he struggled to make sense of the man's cryptic words. He looked back at Grace, desperate for some kind of explanation, but she remained silent, her eyes pleading for him to understand. The man continued, his grin widening into something almost unhinged. You think Carter controlled everything? Well, Carter was just a vessel. Sacrifice. And now it's time for the real game to begin. The veil is thin, Jason. And you've just walked right through it. Jason's heart slammed in his chest. The mention of a veil, of something thin, something separating them from whatever this man truly was, struck a deep primal fear inside him. The house around him felt alive, like it was holding its breath, waiting for something to happen. Without warning, the man reached out, grabbing Jason by the collar and pulling him close. The force of the grip was enough to knock the air from his lungs. You've uncovered too much, Jason. It's too late for you. It's too late for Grace too. He turned toward her, his gaze cold, almost dismissive. But don't worry. You'll both be part of the new beginning. Jason struggled to breathe, the man's grip tightening as his words sank in. A sickening realization crept into his mind. This was it. This was what he had been stumbling toward all along, the true source of the darkness in this town, in this place. This wasn't just about Elijah Carter. It wasn't just about the bank or the businesses. This was about something ancient, something far beyond human comprehension. Something that had been waiting, dormant, for decades. And Jason had just woken it up. He had no idea what he was dealing with, but one thing was clear. This wasn't going to end the way he thought it would. There was no way out. The man, the force controlling everything, seemed to know this. His smile growing wider as Jason's realization deepened. You've been searching for answers, but now that you know the truth, the man said. His voice almost tender in a way that made Jason's skin crawl. You'll never be the same. No one who learns what you have can ever leave the way they came. Jason's mind raced, trying to think of a way out, trying to find anything that could stop this. But before he could formulate a plan, the man suddenly dropped him to the floor. His laughter ringing in Jason's ears as he staggered backward. Jason looked up, and for the first time, he saw something in the man's eyes that chilled him to his very core. It wasn't just malevolent, it was ancient. It was power. And it was waking up. Grace's voice came again, weak but desperate. Run, Jason. You need to run. But before Jason could react, the house itself seemed to shift again. The walls groaned, and the air grew colder. The man's laughter continued to echo, and then, in a blur of motion, the world around Jason seemed to fracture. The ground beneath him began to shake, and the light flickered out. Darkness swept over him, and for a moment, he thought he saw something. Someone standing in the doorway watching. And then, nothing. Jason's breath came in ragged gasps as the air around him pressed in from all sides. The weight of the moment, of the danger that had finally caught up to him, sank in like a stone. The darkness was closing in, but one thought remained clear in his mind. This wasn't just about surviving anymore. This was about escaping. If he could get out, if he could make it to the door before the man, and whatever he was, claimed him completely, maybe there would be a chance. But as he took a step forward, a shadow moved ahead of him. And then the world went black. The world spun around Jason, the darkness enveloping him in every direction. His chest tightened as he stumbled forward, each breath harder to take. But he couldn't stop. He had to escape. The house, no, whatever this place was, seemed to fight against him, pulling him deeper into its web. The sound of footsteps echoed in the distance, growing louder with every passing second. The man, the keeper, was coming for him. Jason's mind raced, trying to recall everything he'd uncovered. The veil, the ancient force, the cryptic warnings from Grace. But none of it made sense. How had he gotten himself into this mess? Why was he still alive? The more he thought, the more questions flooded his mind. But he couldn't waste time. Every step felt like a battle, like the very ground beneath him was trying to drag him down. His hand brushed against the cold wall as he moved through the hallway, but just as he reached the door, a force slammed into him, sending him crashing to the floor. The figure loomed over him, its face shadowed but unmistakable. The keeper, the one who had been pulling the strings all along. "You should have stayed away," the man said softly. His voice no longer mocking but filled with an unsettling calm. "But now you've seen it. You've opened the door, and there's no going back." Jason's heart pounded in his chest as he pushed himself up, panic rising. He knew he couldn't fight this thing, whatever it was. But the door was still open. He had to reach it, had to get out. Before he could move, the man took a step forward, his presence almost suffocating. "Grace wasn't your savior, Jason. She was just another pawn like you. She thought she could stop it, but she was only ever a part of the game." Jason's thoughts scattered. Grace had been trying to warn him. She hadn't known the full extent of it, but she had felt it. The danger. The pull of whatever ancient power was behind all this. She hadn't been the enemy, but she had been used just like him. The man's grin returned, dark and knowing. "You still don't understand, do you? This isn't just about power or money. This is about control. And you, Jason, have been marked from the very beginning." Jason's mind snapped back to the first moment he'd walked into that bank. It had all felt off. The strange energy, the unnerving sense that something wasn't right. He had been too caught up in the mystery, in the chase for answers, to see what was staring him in the face. The keeper's eyes glinted with an almost otherworldly hunger as he spoke again. "It was never about saving Grace. It was about finding you." A chill ran down Jason's spine. His breath caught in his throat. "What do you mean? What do you want from me?" The keeper's laugh echoed through the room, but it wasn't a laugh at all. It was the sound of something ancient, something far beyond human comprehension. "You've been the key all along, Jason. You're the one who unlocked this, the one who finally saw what's been hidden in plain sight." Jason's stomach turned. Key. He was the key. He had only been searching for answers, trying to uncover the truth. But now, as the keeper's words sank in, Jason realized the truth was far more terrifying than he had ever imagined. "You see, Jason," the keeper continued, "every town has its secrets. Every place has its darkness. And when the veil thins, when the right person comes along, it can all be unleashed. You've been the one to bring it back. And now there's nothing stopping it." Jason's heart hammered in his chest as the weight of the keeper's words hit him like a punch. The town, the bank, the people, they were all part of it. This wasn't just about uncovering a conspiracy. This wasn't even about an old man with too many secrets. It was about something far worse. Something far more dangerous. As the keeper's shadow loomed over him, Jason realized that he wasn't just fighting for his own survival anymore. He was fighting for the very soul of the town. For everyone who had been unknowingly pulled into this web. And it was up to him to end it. But how? Without thinking, Jason pushed himself up from the floor. His body moving on instinct. He didn't know how much time he had, but he knew one thing. If he didn't act now, everything would be lost. As he lunged for the door, he felt a sudden pull, like invisible hands grabbing at his legs, dragging him back. The keeper's voice rang out, cold and commanding. "You can't escape, Jason. It's already begun." But Jason wasn't listening. His fingers scraped the doorframe, his heart pounding in his ears as he reached for the handle. He pulled with every ounce of strength he had left. The door creaked open just enough for him to slip through, and the moment he did, the air outside felt like a rush of fresh oxygen. He didn't stop to look back, didn't stop to think about the consequences. He ran. He ran faster than he ever had before, each step taking him further away from the house, from the keeper, from the nightmare that had been consuming him. The town outside was eerily quiet, as if everything had paused, waiting for the next move. But Jason didn't know what the next move was. He didn't know if he had stopped anything, or if the darkness was still coming for him. He couldn't even trust his own thoughts anymore. He just kept running, hoping that somehow he could outrun what he had unleashed. As he reached the edge of town, Jason turned one last time, hoping to see some sign of life, some confirmation that he had made it out. But there was nothing. The silence stretched out, broken only by the sound of his ragged breath. And then, in the distance, he saw something. A figure standing on the horizon. It was Elijah Carter. And as their eyes met, Jason knew. This wasn't over. It had only just begun. The keeper had been just the beginning. The real danger was still out there, waiting for the right moment to strike. And Jason had just become the final piece in a game that spanned centuries. Jason stood frozen. His eyes locked on the figure in the distance. Elijah Carter. The same man who had been at the heart of everything. The one whose mysterious disappearance had started it all. Jason's breath caught in his throat as the man took a slow, deliberate step forward. The silence between them felt heavy, almost suffocating, like the world itself was holding its breath. Elijah's face was older now. His once sharp features softened by time, but the intensity in his eyes was unmistakable. It was the same hunger Jason had seen in the keeper's eyes. A dark, ancient force that had been lying dormant, waiting for the right moment to resurface. Jason's heart pounded in his chest as Elijah drew closer. He should have been afraid, but there was something else in his gaze now. Something that made him realize the true weight of what was happening. This wasn't just about a man or a place. This was about a cycle, a power that had been passed down through generations, manipulating people, bending them to its will. "You shouldn't have run, Jason." Elijah's voice was calm, almost soothing. But Jason could hear the warning in it. "You've opened something you can't close. The darkness has already begun to spread, and now there's no going back." Jason clenched his fists, the weight of Elijah's words sinking in. The town, the bank, the strange events, it was all connected. This wasn't just a random series of coincidences. It was all part of a much larger, much darker story that had been unfolding long before Jason had even arrived. And now he was a part of it. A part of a legacy he had never asked for. "What are you?" Jason finally found his voice. The question had been burning in his chest ever since he had set foot in this town. He needed to know the truth. He had to understand how deep this went, how far the darkness reached. Elijah's lips curled into a faint smile. "I'm not what you think, Jason. And neither are you." He paused, his eyes studying Jason intently, as if searching for something. "You see, it's not about being a victim or a hero. It's about understanding your place in this cycle. Jason shook his head, trying to grasp what Elijah was saying. He had heard the word cycle before, when the keeper had mentioned it. But what did it mean? How could Jason, a simple man from a small town, be involved in something so ancient, so powerful? You've been chosen, Elijah continued, his voice low and steady. The moment you stepped into the bank, you made a choice. You set in motion something that could not be undone. But it's not too late. You can still make a difference, Jason. If you want to. Jason's mind raced. Make a difference. He had no idea how. All he had wanted was to find answers, to uncover the truth. Now he was staring down a legacy he couldn't understand, a force he didn't know how to fight. I don't want to be a part of this, Jason said, his voice tinged with desperation. I just want to stop it. All of it. Elijah's smile faded, and for a moment, Jason saw something in his eyes that wasn't quite human, something dark, ancient. That's the problem, Jason. You can't just stop it. It's been here long before either of us, and it will be here long after we're gone. But there is a way to change the cycle, to break free of it. Jason's heart skipped a beat. Change the cycle. Break free of it. Was it possible? Could he really undo all the damage that had been done? Elijah stepped closer, his gaze never leaving Jason's. There's a power within you, Jason. A power you don't even understand yet. But you've seen the truth. You've uncovered the secrets that have been hidden for so long. And now, you have to decide what you're going to do with it. Jason felt a shiver run down his spine. He could sense the weight of Elijah's words. The power was in him. But how? Why? Before he could respond, a voice called out from behind him, pulling him out of his thoughts. Jason! He turned, his heart leaping as he saw Grace running toward him. Her face was pale, her eyes wide with fear, but there was something else there too, something that told him she wasn't just running from the danger, she was running toward it. Grace, no! Jason called out, his hand outstretched as if to stop her. But she didn't listen. She stopped in front of him, her breathing ragged. You can't do this alone, Jason. We have to end it together. It's the only way. Elijah watched them both, his expression unreadable. It's too late for her too, Jason, he said, his voice cold. You can't protect her from this. Not now. Not after everything that's happened. Grace didn't flinch. Instead, she looked Elijah in the eye and said, You're wrong. We're stronger than you think. Jason felt a surge of hope. For the first time since this nightmare had begun, he felt like they had a chance. Together, maybe they could stop it. Maybe they could break the cycle. He wasn't sure how, but he knew they had to try. How do we stop it? Jason asked, his voice steady despite the turmoil inside him. Elijah's smile returned, but this time it wasn't as threatening. You can't stop what has already begun, he said softly. But you can choose how it ends. The power is in your hands, Jason. It always has been. With that, he turned and began to walk away, his figure disappearing into the horizon. Jason watched him go, feeling a weight settle on his shoulders. The truth had been revealed, but it was only the beginning. The power that Elijah spoke of, it was real. And now it was up to Jason and Grace to decide how they would wield it. The town, the darkness, the power, everything had changed in an instant. But as they stood there side by side, Jason realized that they still had one thing left. The choice. The choice to fight, to face the unknown, and to change the cycle that had held this place captive for so long. Together they would find a way. They had to. And as the sun began to set behind them, casting long shadows across the ground, Jason knew one thing for certain. Their journey was far from over. But at least they would face it together. The darkness was still out there, but now they had hope. And hope, Jason realized, might just be the greatest power of all.